Today we're going to take different exposures of a total solar eclipse and combine them into this neat HDR composite in Affinity Photo, which is a completely free software. HDR is short for high dynamic range, and our eyes can magically see things in high dynamic range, but cameras cannot. Cameras can only see one exposure at a time. So the trick that we do is take a bunch of exposures at slightly different settings so that we can reveal different parts of the solar eclipse's corona and apply them and combine them into a single image where we can see all of the layers. And the easiest way to take those kinds of exposure is to do something called bracketing, where you have one exposure and then you can use software to take slightly different exposures. Many modern cameras have bracketing built in. All of my Canon cameras are older, so they can do 3 brackets, but many modern cameras can do 7, 9, 11, 13, and even unlimited. And if you need an extra bit of help, you can use software such as SetNC, which is short for Solar Eclipse Timer and Controller. I have a whole video on that and how it automates all solar eclipse imaging, so check that out. Now this video assumes that you have your own eclipse data, and there is an eclipse coming up. So if you're going, now is your chance to get some data. And all of the images that we're going to be working with were taken during the phase of totality, which means that we look at the sun without any filters or without any solar eclipse glasses. And the goal of this video is to show you how to do this work in Affinity Photo, which again is free. I have a previous video from a couple of years ago showing how to do this in Photoshop. And today I'll take you through a couple of levels of HDR processing all within the same video. What that means is that as we're going through this video, you can basically stop anywhere once you're satisfied with your images and your data. But we'll eventually land on this at the end of this video, which I think looks pretty cool. Now, if you're a paid patron or a supporter here on YouTube, you'll get an extra video shortly where I show you how to take what we've learned in this video, iterate on it, and get something sharper that looks a little bit like this. Once you're comfortable with everything, you can go even further by yourself and get something like this. Now, this image has a much nicer, much sharper coronal details, and all of this was done using additional layers and using the same tricks that I will show you in this video. So let's dive into the software and see what we get. On August 8, 2024, I took a lot of images, and this is just with one rig. There's about a little over 1,700 images here, doing exposure bracketing throughout the eclipse. And what we're after are the middle images here, where totality is visible, because that's where the corona is going to start to pop for us. And I'm not going to sit here making you wait through while I sift through these. So I already did it. So in this folder here, in my Eclipse tutorial folder, I have 12 frames that I've selected that we're going to stack in Affinity Photo. So if you don't already have Affinity Photo, download it and open it up. And we're going to work on a blank canvas. We're going to go to File, New Image Process, and we're going to click on Stack. I know we're doing an HDR stack of the solar eclipse, so you may think we're going to click on HDR merge, but that does a completely different thing. We're going to do stack because we want to do a mean stack of all of the frames. Here, we're going to click on Add. Navigate to the folder where all of your files are. I'm already there. You can select all of them with your mouse or do Control A, select all, and click on Open. And they get neatly listed here. I would recommend trying the automatic align images and see how it turns out. It may not be perfect, but I find that Affinity Photo does a really nice job aligning all these image photos. I would also recommend changing it from perspective to scale, rotate, and translate. At least for my images here, it does a really nice job of moving the frames around and making them stick, whereas perspective could warp each of the frames, and we don't want that. I also click on live alignment, and we'll get the layer with all of the images in there and click OK. Depending on where your files are, this could take a minute. All right, that took about 30 seconds for my computer. And then on the right-hand side, we have this new layer called Live Stack Group. If we expand it using the caret, we'll see it has all of our frames in here. For some reason, it defaults to pass through. We're going to switch it to normal. And I'm going to move my 1 second exposure down to the bottom, only because it doesn't really matter, but I want it to go from the shortest exposure to the highest exposure this way. But again, it doesn't really matter. If we zoom in, we can see that it did stack. It did some kind of stacking, but by default, Affinity Photo does a median stack, and we want to do a mean stack where we're averaging out all the pixels and putting them onto this canvas. To do that, you click on this little icon under the name of the group, name of the layer group, where it says live stack group, and by default it's median. So you click on this and you have options of various stacking types, stacking algorithms. The mean stack is what we're after, but you can also check out the other ones and see what's over there, right? Like even minimum looks kind of cool too. Maximum was just everything. So play with those and see what you get. We're going to do mean stack, and this already looks kind of pretty cool. Now, while practicing for this tutorial, I did notice that I have a weird frame here where things start to look a little bit wonky, and it's my 1/250th, or sorry, 1/125th of a second exposure. So if I hide it, it actually, you can see that it kind of just like looks a little bit better. For some reason, the sun in this exposure or the moon in this exposure looks smaller than the rest of them, so it looks a little bit wonky. So I'm actually not only going to delete or hide it, I'm going to delete this frame so that it's not here anymore. And this is one of the benefits of stacking in Affinity over Photoshop, whereas in Photoshop, we don't have as much control once you select the mean stack. Once you convert the frames and do a mean stack, is what I'm saying. Now, zooming in, if we see that frames are kind of misaligned, you can actually select the frame, make sure your Move tool is selected, or click V, and you can move the frames around until you manually align them. But like I said, Affinity Photo does a really nice job of aligning the moon and the sun here, so the eclipse is pretty nicely aligned. I would recommend, if you're doing a manual alignment, if Affinity Photo did not do a good job, if there are any other markers such as prominences, like these two here, try and stack on the prominences or align on the prominences, because those tend to be static, whereas the moon actually moves across the field of view of the sun throughout the eclipse. So this little variation here is actually a true variation of the moon moving from here to here. It's very small, but in photography with a medium-sized telescope, it shows up. I'm not too worried about this right now because I'm going to actually cover this area of the moon using a static frame later on, just so it just looks black, because I didn't get a good enough earth shine on the moon here. But anyways, I would call this level 1 done, because when we look at the prominences here, or the corona here, it actually looks kind of nice, right? You can see the coronal lines, you can see the prominences, maybe increase the contrast and saturation a little bit, but for many people, like doing this kind of a HDR mean stack is all you basically need. But if you want to do more, we're going to move on to level 2 that I'm calling. It's going to be similar to the pellet method that I showed in Photoshop a couple of years ago, but we're going to do it in Affinity Photo. Before we move on, the first thing we need to do is we need to crop this so that the eclipse is in the center. Now, when I was taking these images, my Solar Quest lost tracking of the sun when it went completely black, but it did find it and kept it in view, but it was a little bit off center. You can see it's not too off center, but it is a little bit. But we're going to just crop it a little bit, move it a little bit, because there's some spacing on the bottom and the right hand side. There we go. It doesn't have to be completely centered, but try and get it as center as possible while also not cropping away as much of the corona as you can. All right, once you're satisfied, you click on apply. And now this is going to be our eclipse frame that we're going to work with. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to click on file and export this as a TIFF. You can do 8-bit or 16-bit. 8-bit is fine. This is a DSLR. It does 8 bits. I'm going to click on export. I'm just going to save it where it is. I'm just going to save it where it is as OG for original graphic. All right, so I have that set up as OG. So now what we want to do is we want to create a blurred frame here so that we can subtract the blurred frame from the original frame and try and get more definition in the corona here. To do this, make sure the live stack group is selected, and I would recommend just duplicating it. But you can also just do it on this, but I'm going to duplicate it. You can do Control J, or you can right click and click on duplicate. I'm going to click on blurred. Or rename it as blurred. Right click, and I'm going to click on rasterize so that it's just one layer instead of a bunch of layers in a group that's live stacked. All right, now we're just going to make sure that this layer is selected, and then go to Pixel, Filters, Blur, and then we're going to do a radial blur. you can see that the coronal lines kind of just blur out, right? You can't really see them anymore. Play with the settings. You want to make sure they're gone, but we also want to make sure that the sun and moon eclipse does not look weird. And I think, like maybe like 20% is good, 25% is good, right? We just want to make sure that we can't see the structures there because we're going to subtract this from our original and get it back. Okay, click apply. And we're going to go to file. We're going to go to export, and we're going to save this as blurred. So now we have blurred.tf. Okay, now we want to open the original back up. Open up our OG. Here we go. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go to Pixel, Filters, Apply Image. This is similar to Photoshop's Apply Image, but that's under like Edit. While this layer is selected, it should be the only layer right now. Since it's a TIFF file, we're going to say Load Source from File, which is going to be our blurred. Normally what we do here is we click on Blend Mode and click on Subtract. And that would give us, you can see some of the lines here, but Affinity Photo doesn't do that as well, mainly because it doesn't have the scale and offset options here. So it took a little while trying to figure this out, trying to do some pixel math here. So I'm just going to switch the blend mode back to normal. Go and click on Equations, leave it on RGB, so we'll have DR, DG, DB, DA, which is short for destination red, destination green, destination blue, and destination alpha, which is just this, the background image here. And we're going to add some formulas here. So the formula over here is going to be dr minus sr. So we're taking the destination red here, subtracting the source red, which is the blurred. We're going to scale this up by 2, and we're going to add an offset of 0.25. So this is similar to doing a scale of 2 and an offset of 4 or 25 in Photoshop. So this is what I figured out. It took me a little while to get all these right. The other formulas are going to be the same. It's going to be DG, SG instead of DR because it's green, and then DB, SB, just copying and pasting. So as I do this, you can see the filaments here start to appear, right? Now, depending on your data, you can play with these settings. You can go for a higher scale here, so like 5 and 5. You can see that it looks kind of neat, right? Play with the offsets as well. Instead of 0.25, try 15, 15, and 15. You can see some really, really nice details out of this. And our goal is to try and get this and try and apply it to our original, because like all of these coronal filaments, they are real, they exist. Your camera caught them, and we just want to try and apply this to our other images, right? So, but I'm trying to keep it a little not crazy. So 2, I think I might do like scale of 3 or something, not 23, but it does look kind of cool. 23, 3, okay. So I think this looks fine. Again, play with these values. These are pretty simple formulas here. Once you have something you like, remember blend mode is normal. Click on apply. Now we're going to export this as whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call this corona, I guess. Previously I called this subtracted. Because we still have our OG TIFF open, do not save this. Let's close it. And then now we're going to open up OG again. So open OG. Okay, great. So this is our background here. We're going to change this, name this original. So if we need to go back to it, we have this. Right click and duplicate this. I'm going to change the name of this to first layer. And then we're going to do a second layer there. So while this is selected, I'm going to click on Pixel, Filters, Apply Image, Load Source from File, and now we're going to load in our corona.tiff. Looks kind of cool, but it's just doing a replacement. So, and this part is fine, except this time we're going to change the blend mode from normal. We're going to go to soft light, right? And click on apply. All right, look how good that looks. So this is the first layer. This is, I'll call this level 2, and this is the original. You can see just like taking some of the fabric, fabricy corona and applying it to a layer, you can see that it looks pretty cool, right? Like this isn't actually a lot of work. And this could be done, right? You can call this level 2, export this, and you are good to go. If you scroll in here, you can see that there is a little bit of bleeding of the reds here. We can fix that later if we want to, but that's going to be one of the last parts. Now we can go a little bit further into this by editing this a little bit, either with adjustment layers or in Affinity Photo. If you click on the little dots here under Studio Manager, click on color grading, and I click on color grading. And now we have something similar to Camera Raw in Photoshop, where we have access to like these quick adjustments. We can also go to adjustments and you have access to all these like levels of white balance, HSL, brightness, contrast, blah, 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 blah. So we're just gonna make some quick adjustments here. So we have brightness and contrast sliders here, so you can increase the contrast, you can increase the brightness, or you can decrease the contrast. You know, play with what your data and see what works for you. You can increase the exposure or decrease the exposure if you want. If you double click, it resets. You can also click on this to reset. You can play with the hue and saturation. You can play with the sharpness and the clarity. So if you click on sharpness, you can see that the coronal lines here, they start to become a little bit noisier, but they start to pop a little bit more, right? So I can hide it. Same thing with the clarity. You know, zoom in and do this. Look at this. Look at these lines here. Again, this is like all real data that the camera captured. You can also go to the adjustments tab here. This is similar to creating adjustment layers by going to pixel, adjustment layer and doing these, but you can also do it right here. So for example, if I wanted to, let's say, play with curves, it has some defaults here. So you can click on S curve. You can see that it created a new curves adjustment here. So just click and drag this into your first layer so that it's inside your first layer. And now let's zoom out a little bit, move this over, and you see that it has a very preliminary S curve here. There you go, very, very basic. Play with the other ones such as levels. I would also advise you to look at. I can say, let's see, darken a little bit. It does a little too much. Let's go back out. Again, I could spend literal hours on this here. And I'm just gonna close the color grading, go back to pixel. And I think this is pretty done, right? We have our first layer here. Looks pretty good. We can export this. We can be happy with what we have. But I'm going to go a little bit further. I'm going to call this level 3. And I'm going to go back to the original layer, right click, duplicate it. I'm going to move it above my first layer. So we're seeing the original layer again. I'm going to go back to pixel, filters, apply image, source. We're going to pick our corona again once more. Right, we already did this part, but this time in blend mode, I'm going to go from normal, I'm going to go to hard light. So last time we did soft light, now we're going to do hard light. And with hard light, like I love just how much more defined the corona is. It does mess up some of the edges here and the prominences here, but like I said, we're going to mask those out. So now I have the hard light here. So if we hide the hard light, you can see the soft light here with some adjustments, and then the original soft light, and then the hard light. And then let's try and apply this onto the first layer. So I'm going to call this second layer, or should I call this the hard layer and the soft layer, now that I'm thinking about it. And I'm going to do the simplest thing. I'm going to change the opacity from 100 to like 25%, I think, or 50%, right? Somewhere in the middle. Do like a third. And you can click on and off. You can see that all this does is it makes the coronal lines on the inside here a little bit more defined. Now, if you want to make it a little bit more aggressive, let's switch the opacity back to 100. I'm going to go to pixel, new adjustment layer. I'm going to do a curves adjustment. I'm going to make sure it's inside my second layer or my hard layer. I'm going to do a little S curve. There you go, so that is more defined. I'm going to go to pixel, new adjustment layer. I'll do a contrast, brightness and contrast here. Again, I'm just like really just worried, trying to get the inner coronal lines here to give me some definition in my overall image, right? So I'm losing a lot of contrast, a lot of detail on the outside, but I'm not after that. If you are after that, play with the settings. Now I'm going to go back and change the opacity from there to like 30% or something. Very, very subtle changes. You can see it makes it a little bit darker, and the coronal lines on the inside start to pop a little bit more. All right, that looks pretty good. So now I'm just going to select right click, and then I'm going to click merge visible. So it'll create a new layer. I'm going to call this finished version 1. So now this is our final mean stacked image. But like I said, we actually want to mask out the center here so that the red of the prominences don't bleed over. And to do that, I'm going to go back to my first frame here where I had my live stack group. And I really liked both the 1/2000s and the 1/1000. So I'm going to select that layer from the live stack group, copy, Control C, go back to my og.tiff, and then Control V, so it pastes it on top. You can see it did a really nice job of basically just putting it where it's supposed to go. So with this layer selected, we're going to just zoom in a little bit. We're going to click on the selection brush tool here. So click and hold this. If you don't see a selection brush tool, you'll have object selection and flood select. So click on selection brush tool. You get a circular brush. We're going to select just the black area of the moon. If you get any white areas, Alt and then click out. Okay, let's zoom in. Control click zoom in. I'm going to change the brush size from 126 to like, say like small. So that I want to get the prominence. Not this. Alt, delete that. Get this. Okay, I carefully tried and get just the prominences here. So once we have this, I'll click on refine. We can see what we see. I'll increase the feather just a tiny bit. Increase the ramp just a tiny bit. I think this looks okay. And in the output insert selection, I want to switch it and change it to mask. Click apply. And now you see that it created a clipping mask on this layer. And it is only showing the sun or the eclipse from this layer and everything else from the layer right under it. So now if I hide this layer, you can see before and after. See, the prominences also look much cleaner. All right, I think this is good. This is great. So now I'm going to export this as completed HDR Eclipse. There we go. I think I'm pretty happy with these results. There are more processing things you can do here to make it look nicer, better. This is the version on Wikipedia. This is one of the versions I did from Photoshop a couple years ago. This was a lot of work, took a lot of time and a lot of steps that I didn't even really write down. So I'm going to continue building on my knowledge with Affinity Photo and see if I can get something similar to that. But let me know what you think. I hope that was helpful, and if you use this process, I would love to see your work. Join our Discord server, the invite link is in the description, and share what you got. I'd also like to take a moment to say a huge thanks to all of my patrons on Patreon, supporters on Buy Me a Coffee, and members here on YouTube for all of the support that you've given me. If you'd like to join this list of wonderful people, please check out the links in the description and pinned comment below. Until next time, clear skies.